is experience capitalization? It's a systematic process. We do this experience capitalization naturally. But if you want to do it well, you need to do it systematically. So it's a systematic process. It's also participatory. You need to have people involved. Of course, there are people doing their own capitalization exercise, but then you don't have the views and the perspective of everybody. This process enables to actually analyze an experience, to document it. This creates knowledge. This knowledge is being shared to generate change. And so we have our cycle. And we have here 6 benefits. The first one is the learning aspect. So you increase your learning by doing. That's what we do. But also what is interesting is that you are learning about how you learn. And therefore, it's good to step back and to allow ourselves this reflection time. So this is an important aspect. So you increase learning, you avoid knowledge loss. So instead of reinventing the wheel all the time, if you're doing experience capitalization, you are going to be able to know, okay, what works well, but also what doesn't work so well. And we are learning from failures. So failing is not an issue. The issue is that when you're repeatedly failing and you don't say anything about it because you don't want people to know about it. But people, rather strangely, when you ask people about what worked, they say, what didn't work? Because they want to avoid making the same mistakes. So this is how you also avoid your knowledge loss and how you will then therefore increase your efficiency and effectiveness, because you have learned from what you have been doing, you have been analyzing what you have been doing, you're not reinventing the wheel, you have looked at what works, what doesn't work, and you try to find solutions for not repeating the same mistakes. And this will enable you to generate change, because this you will find new ways of doing things, or you will analyze how you were doing things, and you're going to see how do you have to improve for the future. It will enable to replicate things, to adopt, others can adopt things, to adapt what you're doing, and also to scale up. So it could be geographically, but it can be also scaling up, going from an experience to a policy. And because this is a participatory process, because you have people involved, when you do that, and when it is anchored into your work, this also enables you to increase the team building. It's a really team building exercise. You have better teams, they understand how they work together, and they know how they can work better together so that they can also achieve more things. And when you have done this experience capitalization process, you have, of course, very good products. You have excellent documents. And these documents, in a certain way, this enables to show what you have been doing. So it's your visibility. You're able to communicate better inside, internally, but also externally. So this helps you also to do the advocacy. And so you're better prepared, you communicate better, so better advocacy and better visibility. So these are really the big benefits of doing experience capitalization.
You could think of as a process which helps us understand in a better way what are we doing, and which helps us see the good steps we are taking, or perhaps the difficulties we are facing, in order to draw lessons that are going to help us improve what we are doing, or which are also going to help us inspire others and let them copy what we're doing or do better than us. Now, it is a process we many times say that helps us not to waste time reinventing the wheel, because probably the things that we want to do have already been tried before, and we just have missed the key lessons or the key ideas which help us do better in the future. Now, but if we think of this I already mentioned the word. We're talking about a process. It is not something that happens immediately. It is not something that we do and complete at the spot. It is a process that takes a series of steps and which takes, of course, a series of time. Some time to complete. We have to go back, and we have to try, and we have to do again. And you have been following this circle, which more or less summarizes, but it is a circle in which we go from one to the other, but sometimes we go back and then we go again. So it involves a series of steps. Now, we are at the beginning at the moment. You've seen this already. So most of the times when we think, okay, I'm going to start doing something, the first question that comes into our mind is how? How am I going to do this? And we start thinking, okay, I need to know the steps and I need to start doing the steps. But when we talk about experience capitalization, we realize that before doing the how, before asking ourselves, how are we doing? We need to have other questions. And we need to ask ourselves, for example, what are we doing this for? What do we expect from this? Who are we doing this? Are we doing this for myself, for my colleagues, or for my organization? Or am I doing this for FAO or for somebody else? Before discussing the concrete, the clear steps, we have to be very clear the answers to these questions. Why do I need to do this? Who is going to benefit from this? With whom am I going to be working? When am I going to be doing this? You remember, if we say this is a process and which takes time, I need to make sure, okay, do I have the time? When am I going to do it? And if I think of a process which involves a lot of people, then I have to see who are these people? So these are the questions that we have to think for ourselves, even before we start thinking how exactly we're going to go.
In the experience capitalization process is that you need to be precise about the subject or what you intend to capitalize on, so that the objectives will be clear and for who, so that then at the end the outcome will have the impact. So I've got this from the interrogation that was happening in our group then, so that we don't need to just throw the random ideas. So we need to be precise so that we will have impact. Thank you.
I would like to contribute.
Yes, Rose.
I think it's important for somebody when they're doing this not to do it in a silo, to have at least a part where they can ping pong their ideas, because there's some things that are very simple, but then you may just overlook everything. But then whenever you have somebody who reviews either the work or mentors you through, then at least they give you that other perspective that you're missing.
We want to actually facilitate a process. The question is, when we're talking about experience capitalization, why do we need it? And you also mentioned some words here. We need to pay special attention to the facilitation process because we are interested in a participatory process, which means that we are going to have many different persons intervening, different persons at different moments, having different opinions. And it helps if we try to coordinate this, we try to guide it, and we try to steer the process so that at the end of the day, we get where we want to get.
Rational, because Jorge helped me to remind why I choose to capitalize this experience. And he like make me understand that the case which I was personally involved, like training people, and how these people really benefited from that. So these real cases link me to the real consequences which can be brought to the other participants of the extension. So that's why I understood that it's very important to be narrowed or linked to the real experience which you did yourself, and which can be scaled up from this point of view. Thank you.
Jorge is going to guide us to the next phase, which is gather, organize, and analyze. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. There was a question in my group that already was pointing in this direction. No, we need to provide the details about the experience, and we need to start mentioning what did we do, what results did we see. So my answer was yes, we need to do this, but that comes only after we have identified what are we talking about. So the first thing we did was identify our experience. I'm going to be talking about this particular case, which I was involved or which I have some information. And once we have identified it and we know very clearly what are we going to be talking about, then we need to start looking about information, which is going to help me describe it. No, so if you remember, we saw on the webinar that you can collect information in many different ways. A lot of the information is already here. You have it in your head because you have been directly involved in this process. So you know it, you've been there. You remember all these things. But there is also a lot of information elsewhere, for example, in the heads of other people or in other documents which have been written. So you need to go and you need to look for that information. And then you organize and you do questionnaires and you do surveys and you go and read a lot of documents, or you go to the field and you observe what is it which is happening there. You collect a lot of information. And once you start collecting, you realize that you have a lot of ideas. You need to organize it because otherwise it's very easy to get lost. So one way of organizing it is to put a timeline and to say, this happened 3 years ago, this happened 2 years ago, this happened 1 year ago, or this happened 2 weeks ago. And if you start putting it in order, then it becomes easier to, well, easier to understand it, easier to play it, easier to complete it. Sometimes we don't do timelines, but we do questionnaires. Not like you have just been filling a questionnaire, but putting answers to questions. And in that way, it also becomes easier to organize, to see what do we have and to see what we don't have. And then we go and we look for it. The thing is, why do we need to do all of this? Because what we want is a description of the experience. And that is what Joop was asking. We need to describe it. And describing means we need is crucial. It's very important to make a difference between description and analysis. The question is, how do we do it? And one very easy way of focusing on the analysis is to remember that when we analyze, basically what we're doing is we're saying if something or the experience is good or bad. So we're giving an opinion. We're trying to say is if what we're doing is good, or we're going to try to say if what we're doing is bad. But then we don't leave it like that. We try to say it is good because blah, 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 blah. Or it is bad because blah, blah, blah. Isn't it? So then we can say that something is good because it is very participatory, or something is good because the impact has been fantastic, or something is good because it is going to be sustainable. Now, all those ideas help us say, yes, it is good. At the same time, we can say that something is bad because it is not participatory, or it is bad because it is not sustainable. And then we realize two things when we are doing this. The first thing we realize is that things can be good and bad at the same time. They can be good because they're participatory, but they can be bad because they are not sustainable. So this gives us the possibility of exploring something in more detail. And the second thing is that we do not just say, oh, it is bad because it is not participatory, because then somebody immediately will ask us, why wasn't it participatory? So we are making it easier to give this why. And then we start thinking, oh, it was not participatory because the facilitator was talking too much, because the rooms were far away, because the timing of the venues were not adequate, blah, blah. So you see what I mean? Then we're making it easier to give an opinion. But what are the key ideas? Then we need to start sharing them. We need to, because of course we benefit a lot from the process, but we also want other people to benefit, and we also want other people to join and to get inspired by the work that we are doing. So we need to find a way of sharing these lessons, of sharing this information. This is what we're going to be talking today. And of course, the process doesn't finish here, but as you see in this orange part of the cycle, we need to make sure that something happens with those lessons, that they are used, that they are put into practice, so that we see the change that we expect to generate as a result of this process. Yes, so during today, we are only looking at one part of this whole cycle, but of course, I repeat,
most of the time is you should start small. Don't think about the overall picture. So in the case of digitalization, don't think about talking about the roadmap or the strategy. Just think about one example, one good practice, one or experience in one specific sector, because this then can be used to explain to others how it was used and how it can be beneficial. So in this case, we were having market information system. So it's not to explain the overall strategy, but it's to look at this existed already in 2018 and it didn't work so well. So what were the barriers that enable this system to work well? And what were the elements that were very successful? And in the analysis, in this case, you will be able to have the lessons learned. Okay, if we want this system to be resumed, then we should be doing this, that, and that. And all the exercise of today, it's really to see what are we learning? What are the things that have to be sustainable? What needs to be in place? So this is why the documentation of the experience is becoming, ideally, if we want this to be sustainable economically, socially, environmentally, and if we want this to be scaled up at the national level, these are all the different points that we should be taken into account. And therefore, your experience helps to become a good practice. So Petrit was saying, but we have many of these experiences. So should we have a small document for each of them? And I say, yes, this is exactly how it should start. You start small, you start small experiences. So you could have something about an irrigation system, a digital irrigation system that will fit smallholder farmers. And you start explaining how this is interesting for them and why they would benefit out of it. So this is what we should be doing. Small experiences, but explaining, and this is very important in the way you're documenting. It's important to explain the how and the why it was done this way, because it's usually people tend to focus on what has been done, but this is not sufficient. What we need is to have an analysis and also lessons learned, and also the advice and the conditions for others to be able to replicate later or to learn from what.
That. And we have to make sure that the ideas that we are presenting will be adopted. So we can think a little bit of theory and we can say, okay, let's say, if I recommend you something to do something, you will compare it and you will see the relative advantage of what I'm saying versus the ideas that you had already in advance. So we can think, as I said, in terms of theory, but we need to remember that we have to put that theory into practice. So whatever we present, whatever the lessons we come up as a result of the description, of the analysis of the whole experience capitalization process, we have to remember that these are going to be read and that they have to follow the theory so that they are able to be put into practice, and so that those who are supposed to benefit from the process are indeed going to benefit. Otherwise, we don't reach what we want to reach. And then, of course, linked to adoption, we think of the other word, which I'm sure you have come across, which is this idea of replicability, so that it is not just taken up by one group or one set of colleagues, but on the contrary, that this is copied, but this is, well, adopted massively, no, by different people. And then again, we have to think of the theory, and you must, of course, immediately think, oh yeah, if I expect people to copy what I'm doing, then they need resources, because I also need resources. So we need more funds, and we need the support of people to, yes. What I'm trying to say is that there is, let's say, some theoretical conditions for this replicability to take place. So those conditions we have to make sure that, well, we are paying attention to them. Sometimes we are not able to influence them, and you may say sometimes you are not able to find resources, but you have to be aware that these resources are necessary. So you have to make sure that at least you mention them, and you make people aware that it is necessary to go and to look for them. Yes, so what I'm mentioning here is that, to go back, we're talking about a process,